In 1943, over the Solomon Sea, sunlight struck aluminum wings twisting through cloud and glare. Radio bursts cracked across the air, fragments of code vanishing in static. 8 Japanese Zeros had sighted a lone American fighter descending at an impossible angle, upside down. From control stations on the carrier deck, observers marked a drop faster than 5,000 feet in seconds. They expected wreckage. Instead, the inverted dive flattened without disintegration. The Lightning rolled upright beneath its pursuers, turning descent into ambush. Gun camera film later measured 90 seconds of continuous fire. 8 shapes crossed the lens, 8 vanished into smoke. There was no dialogue, only the vibration of airframe, recoil, and the slow spin of altimeter dials. Technicians who studied the film found stress readings beyond tolerance, yet the structure held. Aerodynamics had not predicted such control. Manuals forbade the maneuver, calling it unrecoverable. The pilot had reversed gravity's order and survived. When the sea finally stilled, only thin columns of smoke marked the coordinates. Witnesses on deck watched the lone aircraft level and climb again, wings trembling, paint scorched to dull gray. The maneuver should have destroyed him. Instead, it altered the arithmetic of flight and forced doctrine to change its mind. In early 1943, the Pacific Sky obeyed one rule: never dive inverted. Doctrine called it suicide. Gravity, they said, was a partner to trust, not resist. Flight manuals printed before Guadalcanal warned that negative entry compromises lift, destabilizes control, and destroys airframe integrity. Every instructor repeated it until habit replaced thought. Across the island bases, American pilots practiced the same patterns: dive, roll, recover, climb. Each movement copied from the Zero's geometry, never improved upon it. The Imperial Navy still dominated vertical maneuvering. Their fighters could pivot upward on half the energy an American plane needed. Allied pilots learned caution the hard way. The moment you chased a Zero through its climb, you died on descent. One mechanic's son from Illinois refused to accept that equation. Transferred to a Lightning squadron, he questioned everything written about drag and lift. To him, flight was not courage, but calculation. During maintenance checks, he asked for numbers no one cared about: oil viscosity under strain, prop balance at negative pitch, elevator tolerance at 6G. He wrote the answers in a small notebook that lived behind his seat. During early training, he began rolling the Lightning upside down before descent. The motion confused even his own wingmen. They called it the backwards dive and waited for his luck to run out. Ground crews joked about painting warning labels on his tail, yet every time he returned with calm voice and steady trim. "It's faster," he said. "Less lift, less drag, more control." His commander disagreed. "You'll tear the wings off." For 2 days he was grounded, assigned to watch maintenance rather than fly. He used the time to study the structure, spar angles, rivet seams, the pattern of stress lines across aluminum. The figures convinced him. The Lightning could survive short negative G-loads if weight distribution stayed even. He drew a new trajectory in sand behind the tents, an inverted curve ending in controlled pullout. Meanwhile, Japanese reports described new tactics: steep climb traps designed to exploit American obedience to gravity. The trap worked because every pilot followed the same script. He saw the flaw. Entering inverted reduced the time between recognition and reaction. It wasn't rebellion, it was subtraction. One senior instructor laughed, saying, "You can't rewrite gravity." The young pilot answered softly, "You can redirect it." Few heard the line over the sound of engines starting up for patrol. By mid-year, the squadron operated out of Bougainville, intercepting enemy patrols that hunted low convoys. In briefings, his name came with a quiet warning: he flies inverted first. Crews half admired, half avoided him. They thought the stories exaggerated until they saw the dive themselves, a silver plane falling backwards through sunlight, turning chaos into precision. In his tent at night, he copied flight data onto scrap paper, comparing descent times. Each test shortened exposure by seconds. Each result carried risk, but mathematics, he believed, was worth more than applause. When the next mission order arrived, escort over Bougainville, high sun, limited fuel, He closed the notebook and slipped it under his harness. The numbers were already memorized. They had laughed at the idea, confident that physics favored tradition. He was about to show them that even gravity could be outflown. He flew a P-38 Lightning, the twin-boom fighter that engineers once called unmanageable. 2 engines, 4 machine guns, and 1 cannon gave it the profile of a flying engine block. Heavy, fast, and unforgiving, it demanded calculation, not instinct. To most pilots, it was a machine that had to be tamed. To him, it was an equation waiting to be balanced. He treated flight as engineering under stress. While others memorized procedures, he measured outcomes. During maintenance, he asked for numbers: oil pressure under climb, torque limits before stall, roll rate at each notch of trim. The crew joked that he wanted to graduate as an engine, yet the questions served purpose. He was looking for the margins between flight and failure. In the evenings, he logged them in pencil on thin paper: 420 miles per hour, stable. 450. Buffet begins. 480. Elevator stiffens. Data, not bravery, guided his hand. The discovery came by accident. On a patrol out of Espiritu Santo, one engine coughed and lost power. To maintain formation, he inverted and held the nose just below horizon. The Lightning glided evenly, no torque pull, no violent twist. Airflow passed clean over the booms. For 12 seconds he felt weightless yet stable. When power returned, a thought remained. Maybe control improved when gravity opposed lift instead of joining it. He began testing deliberately at dawn when air was smooth and radio silent. At 12,000 feet, he rolled upside down, throttled back, and pushed. The horizon reversed. The altimeter blurred. The airplane dove like a hammer dropped handle first. At 500 miles per hour, the frame vibrated but did not fail. When he rolled upright at 2,000 feet, the controls obeyed instantly. He wrote one word in his log: confirmed. The report reached command before the ink dried. The operations officer read it twice, then underlined inverted entry. Unapproved, he said. The pilot was grounded for medical check, then cleared. In his notes, the doctor wrote, "Neck strain, judgment intact." That line would later appear in more than one engineering memo. He flew again 3 days later. Each flight added precision, half rolls, trim throttle, minor altitude corrections. What began as defiance became repeatable pattern. His gunnery accuracy rose. His recovery speed improved. The Lightning, built for brute endurance, now performed with surgical grace. Instructors dismissed it as luck. Negative G-dives ruin engines, they said. He checked his gauges mid-maneuver. Temperatures normal, pressure steady. Gravity, he decided, was predictable. What failed was man's misuse of it. Word spread through the 339th Squadron. They called it the backwards dive. Some mocked, others tried and quit after the first stomach-turning second of inversion. Only he endured long enough to see the result. At briefing tables, diagrams of his maneuvers appeared beside standard combat loops. The symbol for his dive, a simple half circle drawn upside down, carried the note: "Do not attempt below 10,000 Fot." By April, maintenance logs listed repeated stress warnings: rivet elongation on tail booms, cable tension beyond spec. Mechanics wanted to blame weather. He told them to measure, not guess. The data matched his theory. The Lightning could absorb more pressure than manuals admitted, provided entry was clean and roll recovery delayed. He had turned risk into margin. When Japanese pilots shifted to twin-axis ambushes, 2 climbing to force an American dive, 2 rolling in behind, he saw the flaw immediately. "They expect symmetry," he told his wingmen. "We'll give them inversion." He traced the plan on a mess hall table: roll first, dive later, let gravity miss its timing. The others stared. "That's backwards," one said. "That's the point," he replied. Lockheed's engineers eventually confirmed his numbers through simulation. The Lightning's twin tail distributed airflow evenly during inverted descent, reducing torsional twist by 14%. He had found stability where charts showed failure. It wasn't intuition, it was unnoticed geometry. Still, he carried no illusions. The body had limits the metal ignored. After long flights, his neck locked, his arms trembled. The medical unit prescribed rest he never took. The notes in his journal shrank to single lines. Up to 505 miles per hour, acceptable. Negative G, 2-sec safe. Control unlocked. He did not call it invention. He called it correction. Each dive felt less like rebellion, more like discovery. Proof that a pilot could use the enemy's vertical advantage against them. To him, every fight began on paper. The air merely verified what the numbers promised. By late June, the pattern was ready for combat. Bougainville loomed, its coastline dotted with smoke and temporary airstrips. Weather clear, sun high, intercept probability near certain. He prepared the Lightning carefully, fuel balanced, propeller synchrony exact, gun camera loaded. On the control panel, he taped a note in blunt pencil. Backwards first, alive second. The squadron lined up for takeoff at dawn. Ground crew stepped back, eyes following the glint of polished aluminum. Before the tower cleared him, he eased the yoke, rolled inverted for a heartbeat above the strip, then leveled. Laughter rose through engine noise. They thought it a show. It was calibration. He climbed east into the hard light where air turned white and featureless. Behind him, the island shrank into haze. Ahead waited the geometry he had spent a year solving. In that ascent, no witness could see that he was already beginning the maneuver that would make him myth. He did not pray or boast. He checked trim tabs, verified symmetry, and set the altimeter at 17,000 feet. The cockpit smelled of oil and graphite. The oxygen hissed its steady rhythm. Then he waited for the horizon to tilt, an engineer in a sky that would soon learn new math. At dawn, the sea shone like dull glass. Bougainville lay ahead, its jungle ridges breathing mist into rising light. The Lightning cruised at 17,000 feet, wings level, engines synchronized within 1 degree of pitch. The air was calm, visibility 12 miles, oxygen flow constant. Below, the horizon blurred into a band of white. At 0 o'clock, radar picked up movement, fast, coordinated, climbing from the east. 8 signatures, formation split in 3s and 2s, the pattern of an ambush. He checked fuel, then tightened straps and leveled trim. The order came through headset, intercept and observe. He acknowledged once, then cut the channel. From that moment, there would be no words worth saying. At 0:07, sunlight flashed off distant wings, zeros circling like silver fish. They dived together, shallow and confident, expecting pursuit. The Lightning held its course, pretending not to see. He watched their approach against cloud reflection, letting geometry write its own trap. At 0:12, he rolled inverted. The horizon turned black beneath his canopy. The altimeter spun. Gravity reversed its pull. The engines strained, but held alignment, both props slicing even sound through thin air. He pushed forward gently, not pulling toward Earth, but sliding into it. Airflow pressed the seatbelts against his shoulders. The gauges trembled at 420 miles per hour. At 0:18, the first 3 enemy fighters committed to their dive. They expected him to drop nose first in the same direction. Instead, he continued upside down, sinking under them. From their vantage, he vanished. Below the cloud line, his nose lifted by inches. The gun camera light clicked red. At 0:24, the first target filled the ring sight. He fired a single second of .50 caliber flame. The tracers traveled flat, striking the wing root, cutting fuel and fire together. The Zero folded midair and fell into haze. He didn't watch it break. He had already moved the reticle to the next. At 0:27, recoil shook through his shoulders, the Lightning humming like wire under strain. His second burst lasted half a heartbeat, precise and cold. The next target erupted in fragments, a spark fading in daylight. His engine note deepened. Altitude 13,000. Airspeed 480. Control pressure heavy but steady. At 0:32, the formation broke apart. 2 climbed, 2 turned wide, 1 rolled inverted to chase. He anticipated the angle and held the dive shallow, still upside down. The enemy overshot and drifted into line of fire. The third burst was mechanical. 1 press, 1 recoil, 1 trail of smoke. At 0:35, the radio crackled. His wingman's voice scattered through static. "You've got 6. Brake." He ignored it. The math was still working. The inverted entry kept lift aligned against gravity. The Zero pilots, turning with instinct, spent their energy too soon. He let their speed bleed. At 0:39, he rolled upright. For 2 seconds, the world stabilized. The sea returned to its proper place. He saw 4 dots left, too high, too low. He chose altitude. The Lightning nosed down again, its frame groaning as if reluctant but obedient. At 0:42, the 4th target crossed ahead. He fired a 2-second line. The tracers connected from spinner to cockpit. The canopy shattered white, then vanished. Smoke rolled downward into the cloud deck. He didn't need confirmation. The camera would see what he couldn't. At 0:45, his controls stiffened. The airspeed needle brushed 510 miles per hour. Compressibility crept near. He trimmed down 2 clicks, easing pressure. The aircraft steadied. A 5th Zero appeared head-on, trying to ram or scare him offline. He shifted rudder an inch. The paths missed. A burst of fire trailed across the enemy's fuselage. It disintegrated before crossing his wake. At 0:49, the Lightning's wings trembled, but symmetry saved them. He reduced throttle slightly, letting metal breathe. The air no longer felt fluid. It was a wall he carved through. Each control input became delayed thought. Yet the dive held. At 0:53, 2 opponents remained above. They attempted to cage him, one high left, one high right, diving together. He stayed low, inverted again, to keep his lift vector unaligned. His wingman's transmission returned faintly. "Still with you. Keep moving." He said nothing. The Lightning spoke through vibration. At 0:57, he rolled knife edge, using mass as armor. The 7th target passed ahead, firing too soon. He turned the miss into opportunity, sliding under the arc, rolling upright into pursuit. The reticle steadied. He fired 1 long burst, exactly 1.5 seconds. The target disintegrated into glimmering fragments. At 1 o'clock, the altimeter read 9,600 feet. Fuel check 40%. Ammunition half remaining. The last Zero approached from rear quarter, closing fast. He saw the shadow on his wing before the tracer lines appeared. At 1:04, he throttled back for 1 second, tightening the wake behind him. The attacker misjudged and drifted wide. He slammed throttle forward again, turning torque into weapon. The G-force pinned him, the Lightning lunging ahead like a released spring. He rolled left and down simultaneously. At 1:08, inverted again, he found the 6th target framed perfectly. 1 burst, smooth and short, crossed its fuselage. The Zero exploded in orange flare, then fell tail first. The air rippled with its shock wave. At 1:12, he leveled for breath, oxygen valve open full. Muscles locked across shoulders and neck. He counted seconds aloud, 4, 5, 6, steadying heartbeat to instrument rhythm. The sky smelled of cordite and oil. At 1:16, 2 more enemies regrouped in distant glare. He closed canopy vent to cut wind noise, every movement now measured, every correction half-conscious. The battle had become mechanical precision, no longer flight, but calculation at speed. At 1:20, he sighted 1 target passing broadside. The burst was gentle, disciplined. 1 line of tracers, 1 final spin into vapor. At 1:24, quiet filled the headset. Only 3 seconds of horizon remained before new contact. The sea below looked metallic and still, a mirror to violence overhead. The 9th minute of combat had begun. The second half of the battle was waiting just beyond the light. At 1:25, the sky split into 2 converging arcs. The remaining fighters bracketed him, one dropping low to pin the exit, the other diving steep from above. The Lightning stayed level for 3 beats, neither rising nor falling, conserving inertia like a weight held in balance. The air shimmered with spent tracers. He adjusted trim by feel, eyes fixed on the higher threat. At 1:28, the upper Zero fired first, the shells cutting white scars through haze. He slid 2 degrees left, letting gravity drag the plane under the burst, then pitched forward just enough to spoil their lead. The enemy corrected, exposing the underside of its wing. The opportunity lasted 1 second. He took it. A short burst severed the wing root. The Zero flared once, then broke apart like ash struck by wind. At 1:32, the second opponent charged low, banking wide, trying to herd him level. He refused the path. Instead of climbing, he rolled inverted again, pressing against his harness until blood lifted from his hands. The dive steepened, 480 miles per hour and rising. Airflow buffeted the canopy, compressing against frame seams. He rode it as though sliding through a narrow gate. At 1:36, the low attacker overshot. Its pilot attempted to correct but met a stream of tracers. The Lightning's guns fired less than 2 seconds. The Japanese fighter burst in a clean orange blossom and vanished beneath scattered cloud. He exhaled shallowly, counting breaths between bursts, a human metronome inside mechanical order. At 1:39, his wingman's voice returned through static. "Fuel low, 2 in sight, east." He replied only, "Copy height." Conversation ended. The noise of wind and engines swallowed everything else. At 1:42, he saw them, 2 final zeros, circling the wreckage below, uncertain whether to engage. He descended shallowly, staying out of direct light. Their wings glimmered silver-white against sea reflection. He climbed a fraction, letting glare hide his outline. The horizon steadied. He waited for their instinct to betray them. At 1:46, the first broke formation, beginning a textbook head-on pass. He countered not by pulling, but by sliding half a wing's breadth sideways. The reticle stayed steady, crosshairs aligned with empty air where the zero would correct. It did exactly as expected. His burst met at mid-movement clean through engine block. No explosion, only smoke peeling backward like cloth in wind. At 1:50, the last pilot dove from the sun, perhaps unaware he was alone. He came fast, precise, full commitment. For 4 seconds, the world narrowed to 2 aircraft bound by geometry and will. The Zero held advantage in position, but not speed. He did not dodge. He waited until the closing rate erased distance, then inverted. At 1:54, gravity switched allegiance. The Lightning fell through the attack, forcing the enemy to follow into compressed air. The Japanese pilot tried to roll with him but reached the critical angle seconds too late. The Lightning stabilized, inverted, firing once. The tracers climbed upward, cutting through smoke, and the final zero disintegrated above him, turning sunlight into falling shards. At 1:57, silence claimed the channel. Only wind noise and a slow creak of cooling metal filled the cockpit. The sky looked strangely empty, clouds curling where shadows had been. He leveled gently, engines balanced, controls responsive but heavy. Altimeter, 8,500 feet. Fuel, marginal. Ammunition, 23%. The numbers meant survival. At 2 o'clock, he began climb recovery, throttle eased to 70%. The Lightning obeyed with exhausted precision. Smoke trails dotted the horizon like fading punctuation marks. For the first time, he realized how still the ocean seemed, its surface broken only by distant wreckage. At 2:03, his wingman reappeared to port, sliding into position a few hundred feet higher. Both planes banked toward home. Below, 8 scars of flame smoldered along the cloud base, scattered in perfect line across miles of sky. At 2:06, the wingman transmitted again, quieter now. "You clear?" He answered, "All clear. Film running." The camera had not stopped once. 90 seconds of combat, one continuous record. He checked that the indicator still glowed red. At 2:09, turbulence shook the aircraft. He steadied with minimal correction, muscles cramping from tension. Sweat had dried to salt lines across his helmet strap. For a moment, he closed his eyes and listened to the engines, still synchronized, still alive. At 2:12, command's distant signal reached him faintly. "Report position." He keyed the transmitter twice but said nothing. The return journey was already measured. Every rotation of the propellers matched the rhythm of his heart. At 2:16, they crossed the first line of cumulus. Sunlight dimmed, the ocean turning dark beneath. Smoke still marked the engagement zone behind them. He logged final details: altitude of entry, approximate speed, temperature at control loss. No flourish, only numbers. At 2:20, Bougainville came into sight. Runway carved from jungle, tents flickering in heat shimmer. He throttled back, beginning descent. The Lightning no longer felt like machine or weapon, only mass remembering motion. At 2:24, he leveled at approach height. His hands trembled, fingertips pale from blood loss. The smell of burnt powder lingered. He spoke the final words of the sortie in an even tone, base in sight, returning. At 2:27, the wheels touched down. The aircraft bounced once, then rolled straight, engine noise collapsing into mechanical sigh. The ground crew waited, eyes fixed on the gun barrels, still smoking faintly. He raised his goggles, blinked through sweat, and shut both engines off together. At 2:30, silence settled. 90 seconds of battle had compressed into one long exhale. 8 enemy aircraft had fallen. The Lightning, scarred and streaked, stood motionless under Pacific sun. No cheer, no witness, only the slow tick of cooling metal counting time. Later, engineers reviewing the film would note a single phrase in their report. Pilot achieved continuous inverted entry and recovery under sustained fire. Duration 90 seconds. For him, there was no miracle, only math proven true. The war had given him gravity as enemy. He had returned it as ally. The Lightning touched down at 7:48. Both engines idled evenly, smoke trailing thin across the runway. Ground crews sprinted forward expecting damage. None appeared. The wings bore heat stains and streaks of exhaust, but every rivet held. The pilot unstrapped, stepped down, and removed his helmet. Someone muttered, "You shouldn't be alive." He gave no answer. The silence carried its own proof. The mission log recorded 8 enemy aircraft destroyed in 90 seconds. Intelligence officers reviewed the gun camera film 3 times, stopping frame by frame. The footage showed no breaks, continuous fire from first burst to last. 8 separate impacts, each followed by a flash and disappearance. 90 seconds, 1 arc of descent, 1 pilot. Command assumed error in timing or film speed. Engineers recalibrated the recorder. It was correct. The altimeter data showed a fall of nearly 8,000 feet. Airspeed peaked at 505 miles per hour. Structural stress exceeded design tolerance by 12%, yet the airframe returned intact. Compressibility should have locked the elevators. It hadn't. The report concluded, pilot achieved stable control at velocities previously deemed critical, method undocumented. When questioned, he offered no theory. His type statement filled 6 lines. Entered inverted to counter drag, roll recovery completed, control retained throughout. There were no adjectives, no commentary. The reviewing officer wrote in red pencil, "Result improbable, requires verification." Verification came in data. The Lightning's onboard gauges confirmed matched manifold pressure on both engines throughout the dive. Fuel distribution remained balanced. Flight path reconstruction showed the inverted entry delayed onset of airflow separation, effectively stabilizing the tailplane under compressibility. What had seemed luck was structural alignment. At medical inspection, his pulse stayed normal. Minor neck strain, forearm bruising, oxygen depletion. The physician asked how he maintained orientation while inverted. "I stopped thinking about up," he said. The doctor, once a physics teacher, noted it as adaptive reasoning. The remark spread through the base like folklore, half science, half myth. That afternoon, the squadron gathered in a dark tent to view the film. The projector clattered against canvas, throwing light over men too tired to speak. The images were silent but exact, each frame a brief mechanical truth. No flinching, no hesitation, only muzzle flashes and shifting horizon. When the reel ended, the room stayed still. One officer whispered, "That wasn't flying, that was calculation." The commander nodded once, and that's why it worked. Official records marked it extraordinary performance, not recommended for replication. The Air Technical Service Command requested copies. Lockheed's engineering division received the footage within weeks. Their analysts, tracing airflow maps on transparent overlays, discovered the same result. Inverted entry delayed compressibility stall by measurable margin. The pilot had not defied physics. He had discovered an error in how it was understood. For days, test pilots attempted controlled versions. 2 succeeded in partial inversion. None reached full stability. One instructor concluded, "Not impossible, only unrepeatable." The maneuver was added to a confidential bulletin as experimental inverted entry, field variant. Meanwhile, rumors traveled faster than reports. Crews called it the ghost roll. Mechanics argued that the Lightning's twin tails somehow resisted collapse. Engineers said symmetry alone could not explain precision. Pilots said he must have found rhythm between gravity and thrust that no training could teach. Each theory carried a little truth, but none the whole of it. Enemy intelligence took notice. Japanese after-action notes from surviving units mentioned American plane descending upside down and shooting upward. They warned pilots not to pursue Allied fighters through inverted dives. For the first time, disbelief had turned into doctrine. Back at Bougainville, he flew 6 more sorties. None reached the perfection of that morning, but all carried its echo. Short dives, sharper exits, fewer rounds wasted. Each time the Lightning strained under load, mechanics winced, yet the numbers still favored survival. He kept flying until his airframe cracked. One morning, inspection found hairline fractures near the right tail boom. The aircraft was grounded for safety. He stood beside the maintenance bay as panels came off one by one. The metal told its story in faint white stress marks. "She held when it counted," he said quietly. The chief nodded. "And so did you." Command offered him reassignment, training duty stateside. They wanted his experience formalized into curriculum. He refused at first. He said the air had taught him everything already. When the order became final, he requested that the maneuver carry no name. The manual printed later that year listed it simply: Inverted Entry Dive Correction, Pacific, 1943. It appeared between compressibility recovery and split-S reversal. No citation followed. At Eglin Field, wind tunnel data validated his discovery. Engineers confirmed that inverted entry redistributed airflow across stabilizers, maintaining lift symmetry longer during high-speed descent. The twin boom structure of the P-38 made it ideal for such motion. The conclusion? Accidental discovery, field origin. By late 1944, the technique influenced design of transonic research aircraft. Engineers called it reverse flow compensation. His experiment had quietly bridged piston and jet eras. Yet he never saw the results. He was teaching instrument flight to cadets who knew only that he once did something impossible. When asked about the battle, he avoided superlatives. "It was just one clean run," he said. "The math worked out." They laughed politely, unaware that he meant it literally. After the war, historians revisited the file. They debated whether courage or geometry had decided the outcome. Both were true. The 90 seconds over Bougainville showed the precise moment human intuition met industrial design, and neither blinked. He flew twice more before demobilization. On his last mission, he performed one slow roll at sunset, inverted for 3 heartbeats before leveling out. No witness understood why. To him, it was not nostalgia, but verification. Gravity still behaved as predicted. The Lightning was retired soon after. Jets replaced propellers. Theory replaced rumor. Yet the numbers from that 90-second film endured in every table of compressibility research for the next decade. His name appeared only in marginalia. Field data provided by Combat Pilot Pacific Theater, 1943. The story remained half legend, half proof. Mechanics still argued whether the aircraft or the man deserved credit. Engineers said both. The record said neither. He had turned disbelief into calculation and survived the arithmetic. The others called it instinct. He called it correction. War had asked for obedience. He gave it precision instead. By mid-1944, the story of the backwards dive had already become a rumor inside the manuals. It carried no name, only a label: Reversal Entry Method, Tested, Pacific, 1943. Instructors explained it as airflow management, never as defiance. Few cadets knew the footage came from a gun camera rather than a wind tunnel. The original pilot was not mentioned. Doctrine preferred anonymity to myth. The technique spread by habit. Pilots began practicing half-roll dives at safe altitude, marking their limits with pencil lines on dashboards. They never called it innovation. It was simply efficiency, seconds saved, energy retained. The unspoken truth was that it came from a moment of near-death precision, from a man who had refused to pull when instinct demanded it. In the laboratories at Wright Field, engineers studying early jet prototypes used his data again. Compressibility problems haunted the new era. The 1943 dive film, copied and magnified, revealed a principle still valid at higher speeds: reverse entry, delayed stall. What began as a forbidden stunt became a foundation for transonic flight. The reports quoted his telemetry by number, not by name. By 1945, he was back at Hamilton Field teaching navigation and instrument procedures. His classroom walls bore maps of routes and clouds, not victories. When students asked about dogfighting, he said only, "Every equation has an answer. Find it before gravity does." They thought it humor. He meant arithmetic. One Lockheed engineer mailed him a technical bulletin that same year. It featured a line drawing of a new aircraft entering a dive, upside down. The caption read, "Principle derived from Pacific Data, 1943. He folded the paper once and slid it into his flight log. That was his victory medal. The combat film that had astonished the Pacific Command eventually decayed to brittle fragments. Only 2 frames remain clear, one showing the inverted lightning at the edge of cloud, the other showing a rising trail of smoke. Between them lay 90 seconds of unwritten theory. Historians measured those frames again in later decades. The geometry was still exact. The Japanese records corroborated the outcome. 8 fighters lost, none surviving. Their surviving officers noted, "Enemy aircraft entered dive inverted, impossible yet executed." It became the first documented acknowledgement of the maneuver from both sides of a war defined by disbelief. After discharge, he returned to civilian life quietly, working as a technical advisor in a small manufacturing plant outside St. Louis. Colleagues remembered him as precise, almost mechanical, marking measurements with pencil lines nobody erased. When asked if he missed combat, he said, "I missed the silence after the noise." He never lectured about courage. To him, war had been a classroom of consequences. Numbers decided what survived. Emotion decided what didn't. His discovery had proven that obedience could be outflown by understanding. In the 1950s, as supersonic flight turned theory into practice, the same aerodynamic curve reappeared in textbooks under a new name: inverted vector entry. The footnote read, "Developed from Pacific field testing, 1943. Students memorized the formula, unaware that its first proof had come through a cockpit shaking itself apart. He died before the first Mach 2 flight crossed the ocean. In his effects, they found notebooks filled with thin equations and one repeated line: "Every motion has an answer. Find the one that survives." Beneath it, a simple graph, 2 curves meeting, labeled gravity and intent. No flourish, no legend, just math made human. The world remembered his 90 seconds as miracle. He remembered them as measurement. The distinction defined him. He had not outflown gravity. He had collaborated with it, turning opposition into balance, chaos into law. For a generation raised on procedure, his silence spoke loudest. The manuals credited physics. The veterans remembered instinct. Both were true. The sky, once ruled by fear of falling, now belonged to those who understood how to descend without surrender. The war had ended, but the equation endured. The original film no longer runs. Only 2 fragments survive, their emulsion warped by time, one frame showing a P-38 inverted against sunlight, the next filled with the blurred fall of smoke. Between them lies the moment that altered doctrine. Historians later timed the sequence again. 90 seconds, 8 kills, one unbroken line of calculation. The footage contains no emotion, no sound, only the rhythm of recoil and the shifting of horizon. To those who watched it decades later, it looked less like combat than proof of concept. The maneuver that once seemed reckless became the quiet border between instinct and understanding. Manuals called it correction. Pilots called it survival. He left no speeches, no memoirs, only numbers written in fading graphite, equations that outlived his name. Yet each time a pilot inverted before a dive, the geometry repeated the same logic: gravity redirected, not denied. When the ocean finally sealed over the wrecks below Bougainville, the pattern remained in air. He had fought not to defy physics, but to learn its language faster than anyone else. The world remembered courage. He remembered precision. They had mocked the idea of falling backwards. He proved that even gravity could be reasoned with.